and IT services. So that's a little bit in a nutshell about Phillip and Stephen. And so, gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the discussion, and let's start our discussion off. Any opening remarks? Phillip, I'll go with you first. Any opening remarks on the topic this morning before we get to Stephen and the first questions?
Sure, and thank you, Charles, and thanks to all our viewers for participating this morning. I'll keep my opening remarks brief. The perspective that I'm going to bring today is around the board and the executive and senior management team, and what do they need to do when it comes to cybersecurity aspects. I know we tend to put a lot of focus on the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, or the CIO, or the CTO, and the IT team, and the things that they need to do, which are very important. But from a business perspective, as we look at things holistically, we need to be very mindful that the other members of the leadership team, as well as at the board level, we need to be very mindful of cybersecurity. We need to be aware, and we need to be trained about cybersecurity and the risks that it poses for the business. I think, and I will speak more on this later, and certainly in the presentation segment later on this morning, on some of the training that's available. But there is a view that cybersecurity is the IT department's responsibility, so let them get on with it. And there is growing awareness that that view is outdated now. That has to change. So the board, the leadership team, the senior management team, all of them to different levels and degrees need to make themselves aware of cybersecurity, make themselves aware of risk management principles, and what they can do to better prepare themselves and better prepare business on the whole. So that's certainly the perspective I'll be bringing to the conversation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phillip. Stephen, over to you, opening remarks.
Okay, good morning all. Thanks for CARSEC for allowing me this opportunity, and BCSI, and for all those who are, participating. Hope you're getting a good experience and good value. We have some very good speakers, so I feel particularly blessed to be in a position to share my thoughts on this stage. What I would say is that I'm going to climb a little bit more, maybe to 10,000 feet, and speak more at a regional level, because what I see happening right now, I mean, if you think about it, we are roughly within CARICOM 10 million people. And if you think about it, that's still a very small nation. And really, truly, what we're talking about is fighting cybersecurity from a country perspective, medium-sized companies. If you look at medium-sized global companies, right, we're talking maybe 100,000 people. Microsoft one corporation has what, quarter million people in a company, and yet we're talking about defending not just Barbados or Trinidad. We're talking about defending the region of just about 10 million people. I'm going to leave out DOMREC. I'm going to leave out certain other LACSEC countries, Latin America and Caribbean countries, and these specific CARICOM. So you have a situation where, we have 10 million people to defend, limited resources, and how do we do that? And I'm going to leave it open-ended, because I think that's where my conversation hopefully we will get into, because we're not talking about defending a region that has limited resources, whose board at the board level, which Phillip alluded to, still has not seen the priority to put the cyber threat landscape as a board level priority. We're now faced with, so we have limited resources, we have limited priority from the board level, and then we have incoherent regional policies at the government level. So we look at things like HIPCAR. HIPCAR was supposed to harmonize both cybersecurity and data privacy at that level, and it never got the real traction it needed to become the cohesive regional framework. And each country is doing their own thing. And I cast my mind back to what happened to the Europeans when they had the data privacy directive, and then they had all these mismatched frameworks and policies, and each country were technically interpreting legislation differently, and it provided barriers to business, real costs, and they had to harmonize that, and it became then the GDPR. So if you look and see what's happening right now, if Barbados takes a high road and have a serious cybercrime framework and strategy, but St. Lucia doesn't, and Dominica isn't paying attention at all, you're going to have this mismatch regional framework where one country takes it serious, one country may take it serious, the other country, is not there yet. But yet we all have to do business with each other. The number one trading partner amongst all of us is each other. So a trading partner for Barbados on all levels, whether it be tourism, exports, is St. Lucia. Same thing for Jamaica, Grenada. We all know that we're tied to Trinidad. So we need to now start taking and that's why I said, Philip, I'm going to take a 10,000 feet view of the situation and realize that to get onto the board level, if the governments in the region aren't making it a priority at the ministerial level to say, you know what, we need to call an emergency summit on cybersecurity, because if you think about it, I'm going to end here. If I ask any Caribbean leader, any Caribbean citizen, have we ever been physically attacked by a foreign country or state, individual, organization? No, we've never been attacked. We never had a missile attack. We never had a terrorist attack, but we've all had cyber attacks. That's the attacks that we're facing. And if we don't get our leaders to coalesce around a priority, it's going to be hard for people like Phillip to convince at the board level organizations to defend it as a priority.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Phillip, he put you on the spot, so I'm gonna put the next question too, because Stephen also mentioned in his comments the whole threat landscape. So, as a board executive, how do you see the Caribbean threat landscape?
Yeah, it's not on the spot because I agree with him. I agree with Stephen totally. Across the board, the entire region needs to take cybersecurity more seriously, and you can expand that to digital transformation more seriously. So when we look at the Caribbean and sort of the threat landscape, all of our governments and our businesses, and you've got to remember there are many different types of boards, many different types of committees that have governance responsibility, whether it's a cooperative, a credit union, a big corporation, a charity. So there are many, many different types of boards that we're speaking about, all the way up to the governance model within our Caribbean islands. And all of them have to deal with cybersecurity. And the question you might ask is why? Well, for two main reasons. One, the digital transformation path that all of us are going through. The Caribbean region is no different from the world. All of us are on a path to digital transformation. If we're going to remain competitive as a region, as well as if we're going to remain competitive in terms of the services that we provide. We're part of that, and we're on that bandwagon, and COVID forced a lot of that activity as well. But it means that if you open that door and you go down the digital transformation path, then you also have to look at the risk that comes with that. So Stephen's point is 100% valid. We haven't been attacked, but yet we're all facing cybersecurity, from the large corporations that have the support and the know-how to deal with it, for example, the banks. But what are the majority of businesses in Barbados? Small, medium enterprise. And I also mentioned cooperatives and charities and all these types of organizations that at the end of the day use information technology, use digital technology, and are part of that digital transformation journey. They all have to understand that when you go down that road, it opens the door to cyber issues and cyber crime and the risk that comes with it. So, just to summarize, we're all on a digital transformation path. It's only going to get more complex, and that comes with many wonderful benefits and opportunities that we all use every day and will continue to benefit from. But we all have to be very mindful of the risk that comes along with it. So let me leave that there, and you can go on to Stephen.
Okay, Stephen. So from your perspective then, I know Phillip mentioned the whole transformation path that we're going down, and he alluded to benefits that can accrue to the Caribbean countries. Then from your perspective, what are the threats you see across the Caribbean to that digital transformation path as it relates to cybersecurity?
Honey, we are in a very precarious position right now. And jumping off from Phillip, I think we work so well together. I would almost think that we rehearsed this. But when you look at digital transformation, right, we don't have redundancies. So if, for example, we have one hospital, that's always a good place to start. We have one hospital. We don't have a redundancy in the hospital. So it means that if the QEH, God forbid, goes down again, okay, we're talking about real lives on the line. For me, the threat has moved from virtual to physical because of our growing dependence on digital transformation as a way for growth, as a way for enhancing the lives of citizens, bringing new services online, bringing new development opportunities. But if you think about it, what budget, and Phillip, even you yourself, Charles, can say, if we have a project budget at $100,000, a good sized project for our region, $100 to $250,000, how much of that is cybersecurity built in there? Mm-hmm. We all look at the cost for the software development itself. Maybe put something there for marketing. Do we put anything in there for the risk of this project going live, risk management? Do we put anything in there for redundancies of the system failing? I cast my mind back. This is 20 years now. I remember this is a video store. So we know what we're talking about, right? A video store moved from paper to the software-based video software. So we know we're talking about video store. We're talking about DV. We're talking about tapes, man, tapes, right? And one day the computers didn't work. And the staff were looking at each other saying, what are we going to do? They could not go back to the old writing on the card. This is over 20 years ago, Charles. They did not know what to do when the computer did not come up. It was not functioning. They sat down there and the tapes piled up. They did not know what to do. So what does that have to do with what we're talking about today? The threat landscape is moving in such a way, when you take Phillip's argument concerning digital transformation, if these critical systems go down tomorrow, how does it impact our livelihood? How does it impact lives? How does it impact our ability to be resilient? One of the other things that I realize is this thing about, and it scares me, it really, really scares me. Whenever critical infrastructure or business gets hit, cyber attack, businesses go into panic mode, try to keep the public out of it. Don't let the public know, right? And that's a big problem. Anytime you're hit, you should scream, I got hit, and here's why. It feeds into the narrative that we don't have a problem. One of the things concerning cyberbullying is if you say cyberbullying does not exist and it happens, people feel that's not a problem. I have problems with companies across the region who feel that their job is to hide the fact that they're hit because they feel that it looks bad on the board level. But what it does, it tells the country, it sends a narrative that cybersecurity is not an issue for us. And what it does, it spill over into some other areas. Funding. You can't get funding, Phillip, if the board hushes it up, and therefore you're going to forget about it after the problem is solved. But the other big problem that's happening now too is that we get hit today and we can't get back up for months. We have a big problem in the threat landscape concerning resilience. Any cybersecurity professional expert says, I am going to protect your network so you don't get hit. Run from that individual. Run from him or her. Sorry, this is a modern world. Run from him or her because you are going to get hit. Difference is how resilient to get back up on your feet and provide those critical services that you provide to your clients and to the public.
Okay, so Stephen, you mentioned quite a few threats. Now, the other thing is, and it feeds in quite interestingly to a session we talked about yesterday in terms of risks. And one of the things we realized yesterday is that, yes, you do your risk assessment, you identify your threats, you do your impact analysis, you look for the mitigation measures, you cost them, and you do the cost benefit analysis and determine if it is worth actually spending that money to protect that particular information asset. Well, that is risk management is part of the whole strategy. So Philip, I want now to ask you again, feeding on to that and some of the things that you both discussed a little bit earlier, is from your perspective, what are some of the strategies that you are seeing across the Caribbean to deal with these threats that Stephen mentioned and you yourself mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So you mentioned one of them, which is risk management. The problem is that within the region, within Barbados, we have a culture, of course, not everywhere and everyone, but we tend to have a culture of not taking risks seriously. And the practice of risk management, there's definitely a knowledge gap that's there. So even the process that you just outlined, I would put it to you that, while we would expect, whether you're a small, medium business or a large corporation, how many senior executives or members of the board are going through that process to derive at a risk landscape and be very clear what the risks of the organization are, and then do the right things to mitigate that risk according to the plan. And I would suggest that's where the issue starts, because cybersecurity is one of the risks that obviously should be flagged and captured on that risk register, on that risk landscape, and therefore have a mitigation plan, how you're going to deal with this, your incident response plan, and so on. But if you're not even doing the risk management to start with, that's where a problem is. So to answer the question specifically, risk management, risk awareness in general needs to be practiced. But I say in general because, again, for all businesses and governments, you're going down a path of digital transformation. There is no part of government today or any business that doesn't have a technology component. And of course, that's going to get more so in the future. So anytime you're talking about risk, you must also be talking or looking at the digital component that comes with that risk. We can't just take all the benefits and think that there isn't a cost that we also need to be mindful of. So you mentioned the cost benefit analysis. Well, we get the benefits of increased productivity and so on. With digital, we need to be mindful that there is a cost to it. And that cost is ensuring that we have all the things that Stephen mentioned, the increased resilience, the redundancy, the backups, and making sure that you've done all your threat assessments, making sure you have the plans in place that should an incident occur, you know what to do, and so on and so forth. So, we need to close the knowledge gap, and we need to do the right things in terms of risk management. And that doesn't happen by magic. It means we need to be purposeful in how we look at this, and we need to have training done. And people tend to think that training is only for the staff, that the leadership team, they reach and they know it all already. That's not everybody's view, but that's some people's view. And no, leadership, Stephen said, we're in the modern world now. The rate of pace of things. Stephen dated himself talking about video store. Stephen, some viewers on this call have never watched a video. So
I agree.
Let's just be mindful.
The gray beard.
Correct. But the point being is that it's only going to get more complex. And therefore, everyone has to, has an individual responsibility to make themselves aware, not just of the benefits and enjoy the benefits, but of the costs and the risks that come with it. At the individual level, an individual level meaning within your home and your family, you have to protect your home and family. But then to get to Stephen's 10,000 feet, that then applies within the business environment, and it also applies at government, across the public service within our countries, and then, as Stephen said, across the region. Because if we're all doing our own thing or trying to do our own thing, it means one, we're spending way more money, and two, we're not doing a good job. Yeah.
Stephen, question goes to you now, because you mentioned earlier the Hit Care initiative, or one or two other initiatives that CARICOM was engaging in as it relates to harmonization of laws earlier. One of our viewers posted this question, and that person says, CARICOM has a prime ministerial subcommittee on West Indies cricket. Do we know if there's any similar prime ministerial or ministerial subcommittee considering cyber risk and cybersecurity? So that's one question I would need you to ask. And before you get to that one, then I would want you now then to also address the whole question of the other question of what are the new strategies you think that can help with regional cybersecurity, and tie that into the viewer's question.
Okay, so as best I know, unless something has changed within the last year or two, cybersecurity is at the ministerial level. For those who are joining us outside the region, ministers get as much done as the prime minister empowers them to do. So you first, if a decision happens at the ministerial level, it then has to go before cabinet, and it goes back out then to at the prime ministerial level, which is then what we consider CARICOM heads of government. So no, there is no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no cybersecurity subcommittee of heads of government. It's normally happens at the ministerial level. So whoever is the minister responsible for ICT or technology within that country, that subcommittee is there. It's not a bad thing, huh? And I don't mind it being there if it gets the daylight that it deserves. And that's obviously the thing, because you can have a prime minister subcommittee on cybersecurity and nothing gets done. So it all depends on the priority that is given to it by the CARICOM heads in the first place. But where can we go from here? And I'm of the opinion that if heads of government and governments that on the countries themselves aren't going to push cybersecurity in a way that needs the attention and it deserves, we have to take up the ball and bat and do things on our own. What I mean by that, there are two things that are outstanding to me right now that we can do that has nothing specifically to do with government. Well, one does, but I'll explain. Right now, Jamaica and Trinidad have something, and I'm not sure the other Caribbean countries have something called a CERT, right? Which is a Computer Emergency Response Team. Now, that is for, it's look at it like those, you know, like they had an earthquake in, I think it's Syria, down that part of the world, and there was these guys that come out that know how to save people's lives, and they kind of help recover. CERTs normally deal with after the fact type scenarios, meaning that in the case like the hospital for Barbados, because that's our last national security threat, cyber national security threat, and I put it out there, it was a cyber national security threat, all right? And it was national security because it put the service of the hospital under serious threat. A CERT would have gotten themselves involved in that type of scenario. What I'm saying, we need to go more proactive and have something called a threat intelligence alliance. Thanks for the question, Charles, because that's an initiative that I am about to coordinate with a number of local critical infrastructures. I won't call the organization's name because we're still very much green. We're now fleshing it out. So what is a threat intelligence alliance? I'm of the belief that although I want to respect the fact that there are boards and there are organizations that should pay attention to cybersecurity, I am worried about the electric company, the water authority, the port. There are certain critical infrastructures that we know if they go down tomorrow disrupts the whole national vibe. The whole national vibe. So we must take those institutions, those organizations with a special kid glove and say, you know what? We want to ensure that you have the resilience, you have the information, you have the threat intelligence to know that if a specific institution to your level, for example, the water authority, if the water authority is seeing an incident right now, their automatic thing would be to stop, share, right, on a platform to let the electric company know, to let the Barbados port know, because a couple of things happens from there. First of all, if there's an ongoing threat in Barbados at a critical infrastructure level, and this could be rolled out to the region as well, I hope it does, all right? So I'm going to start the Barbados Threat Alliance, right? And I'm hoping that we can, through a platform like CARISEC's platform here, that we can start looking at a regional approach to this thing. So if the water authority is seeing a incident, right? A particular type of incident, it may not turn into a actual ongoing threat, but it may be incident where, you know what, this particular pattern is something that I should let my other colleagues know about. What it does, it puts his other critical infrastructure players on alert. So look at like how 9/11 happened. If you realize you're going to DHL and other organizations, they have like a green day, a yellow day, a purple day, a red day, right? So you have the situation where if the water authority was under a threat or under a watch for a threat, it would move the other critical infrastructures from green being a good day to maybe yellow. And for them, it may mean something. It means watch the firewalls all day. You might say, you know what, it's a good day. I'm not watching the firewalls. I'm not watching the EDRs, the detection response platforms that I may have, right? So I may be a little bit loose, but if it goes into a yellow day, meaning that a partner, a critical infrastructure partner is under threat, I'm going to pay attention to that threat. I'm going to pay attention to my infrastructure.
Thank you, Stephen. Very interesting. You mentioned quite a few things there. The whole question of the CERT, because only yesterday on one of the presentations, the mention was made of the CERT in Grenada and the fact that it's actually functioning. And, we were bemoaning the fact that that was the only known CERT within the Caribbean that we knew were actually functioning. And as you said, a region of 10 million people, all these countries, as Phillip also said, going down the same transformation path, and only one CERT within the CARICOM is working. But Phillip, I'm going to come to you now with a question, which will be the final question, unfortunately, for our session. Basically, the question is the same. What can we do? How can we take a regional approach in terms of dealing with this, especially from a business perspective?
Yeah, so so be mindful that some of our businesses are regional, so they get to have the benefit of being across the region, working with senior leadership teams in different countries. And in many cases, they might have a center of excellence providing that cybersecurity across the region for that organization. And those models can work very, very well to span the region. But of course, most companies are not like that. So most companies exist as one or a couple of branches within their home country. So they don't get that benefit. So, overall, it comes back to at the senior leadership level, because when we're talking small, medium enterprise, you're not really talking at the board per se, but at the senior leadership level, they need to close that knowledge gap. For companies that do have a board, then the boards need to recognize what I said earlier. They themselves, it's their duty as the board that falls under all the same duties that boards have, fiduciary duty and accountability and so on. It is their duty to make themselves aware of what are the questions they should be asking as directors on the board of the CEO, of the senior leadership team when it comes to cybersecurity. What are the questions they should be asking, and making sure that the senior leadership team are doing the right things. That's what it boils down to. Of course, the same thing applies across the public sector. Close the gap, the knowledge gap, raise the level of awareness. I'll speak about it some more this afternoon, but at the end of the day, everybody isn't technical and doesn't need to be technical to understand cybersecurity, to understand risks and risk management. And it's just about closing that knowledge gap and then putting best practice in place to follow through on that.
Okay, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are out of time. Just didn't have enough time to take the conversation even further, but I still want to thank you for taking the time to join us this morning and to share with our audience your thoughts on the topic of regional cyber climate. Of course, for those of you who are with us, we move on to our next session at 9:35, and I'm going to invite you to join us in that next session. Phillip and Stephen, again, thank you so much on behalf of CARISEC, and we look forward to seeing you again. So good morning, everybody, and we'll see you in the next session.